I was attempting to ignore my mother, who was nagging me again about my job. Mom, let it go, already. I work at a salon you frequent. Mom sighed, I know, darling, but you just rent a chair. Why don't you ask for a partnership? Or, Dad chuckled. You could go back to school and be a doctor like your father. Charlotte looks at eyes all day, I snorted, flipping through TikTok. Besides, aren't 2 doctors in the family enough? Alvin Michael Jacobs said, there are never too many doctors in a family. I'm happy with my career, Daddy, I whined. Charlotte makes it possible for others to see and admire the work I do on hair and faces. My father shrugged at my mother. She has a point, my love. I don't care that she is a stylist, Mom insisted. I care that she only has a chair. 1. Alyssa has the potential to own her own shop or enter a partnership with Dolores, and that shop is always filled with clients. She has to have more than just a steady income. Our daughter needs stability. If she's a partner, she'll have it. They kept going, and I opened an app that showed rentals in the area. I had to get out of that house. At 25, it was time. My cell pinged, and my eyes bucked at the text. Next, I checked my bank account and sighed. I cannot believe Serena got tickets. They were sold out here before we could even get on the website. For who? Beyoncé, Mom. She was sold out in Chicago, but Serena's dad bought her 4 seats in London. How much are the plane tickets? I wondered, still grinning. Alyssa, darling, we're not done discussing Dolores' shop. I ignored Mom. Daddy, I need my passport. We're leaving on the 13th and returning on the 16th, Serena says. Mom, I need your LV suitcase, please. I finally looked at her. Can this hold until after my trip? I promise when I return, we'll discuss a partnership, but I can tell you now that it won't be with Dolores. I can't stand that woman, and that's why I'm only there when she isn't. Dolores Mayfair happens to be a good friend of mine and has been for 30 years. I designed her first shop and store, you know. I smirked and asked, in those 30 years, what has she done for you, besides take your money when she did your hair? After you've thought about that, think about all you've done for her, including bailing her out of debt a few times. Has she ever paid it all back to you, Mom? You should already be considered a partner with her, owing you at least $50,000 over the last 5 years. Dad looked at Mom and shouted, I'm calling Walton in the morning. How much does she owe, Faye? Mom used her fork to flick green beans on her plate. I'm not for certain. I held up a finger and went to my bedroom. I returned to the dining room with a folder and gave it to my father. When he opened it, his eyes filled with anger as he turned to my mother. $217,000, Faye. He turned the summary page to Mom. $217,000, he shouted, making her jump. How? Mom sighed. I loan her money when she falls short for repairs and supplies. She never falls short, I said. She uses you and several others because she's greedy. Think about it, Mom. If she wasn't, why does she ever charge you for services and at full price, when you loan her every time she whines about money? My mom blinked several times, then slammed her fork on the table. How did you know about those loans, Lissy? I answered. During a downtime, she tasked Jess and me to clean her office. She said it was all trash, and once she threw out that bag in the alley, I went in it and grabbed her signed IOUs. When I brought it home, I tallied them. She got $500,000 out of Jillian Drew. Dad raised a brow, and Mom nodded. Miss Dolores was getting sued. Good. I never liked that heifer. Daddy, I cooed after texting with Serena about my share of flights and a room. May I have a few $1,000s for this trip? I have some, but I need more for fun while in London. He nodded. Have fun, sweetheart. I squealed and ran to my room to decide my wardrobe while I called my sister. She was excited for me, and we made a date to go shopping, her treat. She'd gotten an inheritance from her father and stepmother, and she unconditionally shared it with me. 2 days before my trip, we hit downtown Chicago, and my sister practically took out a second mortgage on us. I appreciated her and promised lots of pictures and videos. The next day, she joined us for dinner with her husband, Joel, who informed us that he was flying to London that night and would be there while I was. I immediately told him that he had to join me for a drink there, and my sister, Charlotte, insisted that he make himself available if I were to get into trouble. I rolled my eyes as my parents agreed wholeheartedly. Those three treated me like I was still 5. Needless to say, we had a blast at the concert. Beyoncé had us on our toes from the moment she started, and I was glad that we missed her in Chicago. Until I remembered that my best friend propositioned my brother-in-law. Joel Hauser came to me as we were leaving for the concert. He came to see us off, since he was in the same hotel, and after I finished my makeup, he told me what Serena said when she let him into the suite, and that he needed a witness after the fact, in case it got back to Charlotte. As soon as those words came out, Serena approached us and said to Joel that one night with him would make her life. She next said that no one would have to know because only the walls in her room would be witnesses, and they wouldn't talk. I heatedly insisted I would, and there was no way I was leaving her alone with my sister's husband after she said that, but Joel interrupted me. He looked Serena right in her eyes and swore there was no one in the universe worth risking his marriage over, and after he kissed my cheek and told me to have a good time, he walked away, and the look on Serena's face screamed that she didn't believe him. We went for drinks with some Londoners and had too good a time with them. We ate, drank, ate again, then had a spirited game of darts, followed by a loud drinking game that I can't remember the rules for, and I knew I needed to call my brother-in-law. Back in our suite, which housed Serena, her sister, Shola, our friend Macy, and me, we continued the party with 3 girls and a guy who was all over Shola. An hour after we got to our suite, Shola disappeared with him. I don't remember his name. Joel sat on a chair with a bottled water and watched silently while the strangers were there and never interrupted us. One of the girls, another whose name escaped me, went to a nearby all-night store and bought a bunch of junk, and when we returned, Joel was gone. I should have known he didn't leave us, but I recalled that before I left, Serena offered him a drink and swore it was only a shot of vodka to loosen him up. Sometime later, the Londoners left, after hilariously asking the concierge to get them a car. After I locked up, I went to a room and dropped across the foot of the bed. I was so drunk, I didn't realize it wasn't my room. Macy found me and forced aspirin and vitamin C down my throat. I woke to sunshine and groaned at the light. I lifted my throbbing head and didn't recognize where I was. I turned to my left, and the first thing I saw was a flaccid penis. I squeezed my eyes, believing I was hallucinating, but no. When I opened them again, the penis was still there. I sat up and screamed when I realized it was Joel. Serena shot up and screamed, "Girl, what?" She was absolutely naked. I looked away and jumped off the bed. Running over to cover Joel, I demanded, "Tell me you did not fuck my brother, Serena." She smiled salaciously. "I certainly did. Twice, after I used my mouth. After he got hard, there was no getting him down." I glared at her. "He's married to my sister, Serena. What the fuck were you thinking?" "I wanted to fuck," she shouted. "I've been waiting for him to notice me since the day we met at your parents' barbecue thingy, and he never showed any interest until last night, so I took advantage." I reached under the covers and found Joel's jeans. It took some maneuvering, but I managed to get them on him after my shoe slid on a used condom. Disgusted, I mumbled, "At least someone had the sense to use protection." Serena scoffed and finally got off the bed. "I did that first round, but have you seen the size of this guy?" That second round, I wanted him raw. I glared at her while shaking Joel. He didn't budge. Looking down, he appeared to be foaming at the mouth, so I called Macy to help me with him and told Serena to get out of my face. Macy and I finally roused Joel, and I called the front desk. I asked where the nearest ER was, but the woman told me it was called A&E there and asked if I needed an ambulance. I said no and asked for a cab. I got Joel treatment and took him back to the hotel when he was released, where I confronted a sober and satisfied Serena. The lab said Joel had MDMA in his system, and his alcohol level was practically zero, I shouted, shoving his discharge papers in her face. What did you do? Would you relax? Shola snapped. I gave her X to calm him down so he would give her a good time. She smiled at her little sister and asked, did he? Multiple times, Serena happily answered. Laughing, those heifers high-fived each other. Disgusted, I packed my things and went to Joel's room, where I showered and dressed. When I was finished, Joel was drinking coffee. When I entered the living area, he said, I've had enough of London. We'll go as soon as I find flights. On the plane, Joel asked me what I knew. His light brown eyes looked worried. Serena claims she performed oral on you and that you had intercourse several times. Joel looked heartbroken. Did we? Were there condoms? I nodded. I only saw one. Serena said that the first round was the only time one was used. His eyes closed, and he turned to look out the window. I love my wife. I held his hand. He gripped it and said, please don't tell her, Lissy. I can't lose her to this bullshit. Honesty, I urged. Let her decide what to do with this mess, Joel. I can't risk that, he insisted. We made vows, promises, and last night, I broke them all. Charlotte is my life. She owns my heart, and if she gives me an inkling that I hurt her, I will break. Whatever I did last night was not intentional. I never wanted to hurt the woman who stumbled into my life at a company softball game. One look at her had me interested. Her laugh made me curious. Her thoughts made me love her. I blinked. You've loved Charlotte from the day you met her? He nodded and tearfully looked at me. Charlotte was interning with a friend, and he invited me along because they were a man short, so I went. When he introduced us, her smile lit up the park, and when the game was over, I asked her for coffee, and we've been together since. Proposing to her was the easiest decision I'd ever made, and our marriage was the best. For her, too, I insisted. And you should tell her before someone else does. If they do, I have you for backup. I nodded. And I have your release papers in my carry-on. Hold on to them, Lissy. Charlotte will need them if she finds out. When we landed, Joel made a doctor's appointment in the airport, and when Charlotte arrived to pick us up, she looked at him with the warmest, most genuine smile I had ever seen directed at another. Before she got to him with her arms open, I whispered, not a word until you say, I promise. He smiled, but it was directed at his wife. She tried to kiss him, but he turned his head. Babe, no, he insisted. I'm coming down with something. She cooed, I missed you, and I don't care, then kissed Joel with more passion than should be allowed in a public location. When she finally released him, she hugged me with the strength of an ox. I gave it right back to her. I avoided Serena when she returned and blocked all her info, numbers, and messages. I had nothing to say to that woman, and I didn't believe I ever would. I moved in with Macy because she had an extra bedroom and was in total agreement with me about what Serena did to Joel. She also stopped talking to Serena and Shola. The Adabamos were on our shit list, and I didn't see them getting off it. I paid my rent, went to lunches, and worked part-time in a new salon because, of course, Dolores canceled my booth rental when she was served a summons on behalf of my parents. Outside of that, everything flowed smoothly until Serena found me at lunch with Macy and her boyfriend. Logan Davies said he was in the mood for barbecue, and I agreed that sounded good when we got in his car. He drove to a place called Smoke and said everything they served was good. He was not lying, and I even ordered food to go. As we were leaving, Serena and Shola were exiting a car with a woman I'd never seen. Shola spotted me first, but I kept moving to Logan's car, even after she nudged Serena's arm and pointed her pinky my way. Scoffing, I got in the backseat and ignored Serena moving my way, but when she reached the car, she frantically knocked on my window.
"Please, Lissy," she begged. "I need to talk to you." I got out of the car and asked, "What?" "I miss my best friend," she sniffed. "Please, I need your help, Lissy." I scoffed and turned to get back in the car, but she gripped my arm and turned me back. Angrily, my hand landed on her chest, and I shoved. Serena stumbled backward, and a woman screamed, "Don't." Shola and the woman with them rushed over and helped Serena off the ground. "She's pregnant," the woman screeched. "Have a care." "Auntie, it's fine," Serena sighed, dusting her backside. She didn't know. I stared at her in disbelief. "You're pregnant?" Serena nodded. "Dare I ask the next question?" I snapped to the sky. Serena didn't say anything else, so I lowered my head and glared at her. "It's Joel's," she said and watched my face. "And you know this because..." Serena shrugged. "Think back, Lissy. I told you everything. Do you think I would have left out giving someone else my body, after telling you about the others?" I shook my head and leaned back on Logan's car. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, staring at the ground. I wasn't going to have it, but my parents decided for me that I should. "You know I don't want any kids. That life's not for me." I snarled at her. "What do you want from me? You're going to join me in Bloomington and help me with the baby." They heard that scoff in New Jersey. "The hell I will," I snapped. "You'll do this on your own, and that includes telling Joel. Good luck for when Charlotte and Angie find out." "Angie?" I smiled. "Charlotte's BFF. She's from the South Side, and she's a strong black woman who does not play about Charlotte. When she finds out, you're toast." Shola said, "We're black, too. We're not scared of her." "You should be," I insisted. "And the two of you are brats who can't do anything besides order people around. What do you know about street fights? Angie grew up having them, and she's not afraid to throw a punch. If you don't help me, Alyssa, then I'll tell your sister this was all your idea." I stared at Serena in disbelief. "My idea? How? What could I possibly have to gain by telling you to fuck her husband after giving him X? Joel Hauser is an heir. His grandmother invented something and left half her estate to him. Millions. I'll tell perfect Miss Charlotte that her precious little sister planned it all and that I agreed to split the money with her after the baby was born." Serena raised a brow. "How convincing do you think I'd be, telling her that story with a baby in my arms whose face was probably going to be just like her husband's?" I couldn't let her hurt my sister. Macy was screaming at Serena that it was her fault, not mine, but Serena could only look at her with glee as she asked, "Just how well do you know your roommate, Macy? Think about that before you answer." Shola asked, "Just how can you prove otherwise?" "Well," Serena asked me, "what exactly do you want?" "Help me after the baby is born until I settle with Joel. After he pays me, I'll send the baby to, well, somewhere. Maybe he'll go back to Lagos with my aunt, and she can raise the child. I don't want anything to do with it, so that's the best option. That way, I'll never have to even set eyes on it and can live my life while spending Joel's money." My sister was a silent wreck through the events from Joel's accident, if she wasn't wailing at her loss. I couldn't handle seeing her in pain, so a week after Joel was laid to rest, I moved to Bloomington. I felt I needed to stay close, to make sure Serena didn't do something stupid with the baby when it was born, and keep him or her near its grandparents, because Willard and Nellie were in as much pain as Charlotte. If this was indeed Joel's offspring, they'd need it, too. Mom begged me to come to Thanksgiving, since Charlotte was leaving her shell. There were still times when she needed a few moments, but she was better than the last time I saw her, she stressed. I agreed. Another thing, Mom sniffed into the phone. What, Mom? Would you stop on the way here and pick up a pregnancy test? I shivered. Mom, EW. Surely you and Daddy are too old for that. Mom said, not me. I'm 63, Lissy. That stage was over years ago. It's for your sister. Your father noticed a bump on her the other day, and I recalled that she hadn't had a cycle since Joel's death. I thought it was the stress of her loss, but now... My heart skipped, and I inhaled. 2 babies at once. Charlotte may be pregnant, and she didn't need the added stress Serena's pregnancy would bring, so I decided to keep quiet and monitor the situation from Bloomington. When my sister's scream reached us in the dining room, I smiled at my parents. It was a happy tone, and one we hadn't heard from her in months. I embraced her when she rejoined us and laughed at her tear-soaked, smiling face. I went back to Bloomington with a full but heavy heart. Serena went into labor and gave birth on a clear, cold February morning. 20 minutes later, she called her attorney, who said he'd get the petition going soon. All I could do was stare at that woman in disbelief. Next, she put the baby in my arms and started researching luxury cars on her cell. Serena proved that she didn't want to be a mother. She stayed put for 9 days, then declared herself healed. She took a long bath, got dressed, and partied until the early morning. She dragged herself into our apartment and went straight to bed. She hadn't laid eyes on her daughter, whom she intentionally named after Joel, since the moment she laid her in my arms. She only held her when they were released because it looked better to the hospital staff, but once we got little Jolie Frances Hauser in her car seat, Serena lost interest in her. Serena kept the partying going and soon disappeared for days at a time. Once, she walked into the apartment bent over, and shaking a bottle at me. "Get me some water for this, will you?" she demanded in a pained tone. "Get it yourself. I'm taking care of your daughter's lunch." I smiled at Jolie as she took her bottle. "What's crawled up your ass?" she snapped, moving like a turtle to the kitchen. "You disappeared again," I shouted and cooed at the baby, who I startled. I had my tubes tied. I'm not making that mistake again, especially after my parents decided not to help me and threatened to cut off Shola if she tried. Watch how fast they come to me when I get my payment. Lump sum, none of that payment plan shit. I shook my head. Man, I wish I had seen her face when she was served. I froze, then turned to her. "You already served Charlotte. Weeks ago. In a few days, a nurse is coming here to swab that baby to prove paternity. One step closer to getting my money." After she got the results, Serena celebrated not coming home. I stayed with the baby, living off the money my sister gave me, and that was dwindling fast. 13 days later, the doorbell rang. I was in the middle of changing the baby's diaper and was still in a bad place from earlier when Charlotte called me. I had been avoiding seeing and talking to my sister until I found out the truth about Jolie's DNA, and now that I knew the truth, it was harder to tell her what I knew. I never wanted to hurt my sister. Telling her that her husband had been assaulted and that a child was born from it would probably hurt her to her soul. I couldn't do it, and I couldn't think of a way to soften that blow. I had a phone installed on the Wi-Fi to avoid her calls, and kept mine silent for the most part, but I did answer her texts. When I heard Charlotte's voice on a call I was positive she didn't have the number 4, I assumed it was Serena and answered with a calm I had to breathe through before I said one word. When I realized it was Charlotte, I became aggressively mean to her because I thought she had found out about Serena, and I didn't want to be her target. I was thinking I would get a break soon when I heard the bell. I needed one. I was exhausted from caring for a baby that was not mine during all hours of the day and night, but I loved Jolie Frances Hauser, yet I hated how she began. I buzzed the door and opened the one that led to our apartment. I was ready to light into Serena for disappearing and having to stare at her keys for a week. I picked up the baby after I heard footsteps, ready to put Jolie in Serena's arms, and shouted, "It's about time you got your ass back here. Do you know how long you've been gone, girl?" I turned, ready to give that Serena an earful, but the sight of my sister and parents shut me right up. Charlotte moved closer, and my mom tried to stop her with words, but my sister kept moving. Shaking, I put the baby in her bassinet, scared I was going to drop her. "Explain yourself, Alyssa," my dad shouted after I turned back to the mini crowd. "How could you do this to your sister? Do you care anything about Charlotte?" I caught his eye and insisted, "I love her, and I always have, Daddy." My angered sister's focus moved to me as she said, "And still, all you ever want is what I'm given. Since you were 5, I've had to put everything I've wanted on hold because you'd demand the same. And now, it was my husband. You could not sit still and let us be happy, could you?" I said nothing. She had the wrong idea. Before I could tell her that it wasn't me who was Jolie's mother, Charlotte slapped me with all her might. "He was mine alone, damn you," she shouted. "Why couldn't you leave your legs crossed and stay away from the man I loved?" My dad rushed to Charlotte and gently said, "Enough, darling. Calm down and think about what this is doing to your body and the baby." I sobbed, holding my pained face. Dad tried to look at her face as he said, "You have to put some of the blame on him, Charlotte, dead or not." She snatched away and glared as she said, "I blame you, too. And you, too," she said to Mom. "Because neither of you could ever say no to this bitch when she wanted anything I had. Placating her at every damn turn. All I heard ever from the two of you was no, just so that you could keep the peace and her quiet, and now look. Look at what she and Joel did to me. Look," Charlotte screamed. "And still, you protect her, like you're saying, fuck Charlotte, she'll understand, just as you did when we were growing up. When will it ever end?" Neither parent had anything to say, and I couldn't either because she was right. I stole all her glee by demanding everything she had, and I had to have it as soon as she did. I wrecked her childhood with my selfishness, so of course, she believed I would do this to her, but why Joel? Didn't she realize how much that man loved and cherished her? We knew this at their wedding because he didn't hide it. I saw his face as he said his vows and slipped the band on her finger, which was not hard to do because I was her maid of honor. Angie was right behind me, holding my hand, as we tearfully watched them become man and wife. With a hard face, my sister said, "I never want to see you again." I screamed for her as she left the apartment, but she kept going. Mom and Dad held me, saying to calm down, she was only in the hall and would come back soon, after she calmed down. Through my tears, as Mom held the baby, I told them everything. Both were disappointed, and Daddy sighed. "Let me go get her," he said, standing. "She should hear this, too." He came back a few minutes later and said she was gone. We didn't hear from her for at least a week, and when we did, it was a text message. "I need space. I'll let you know when I'm in labor." She didn't. Braden Charles was born on May 17th, and all we received was a picture of Joel's parents and the baby. Mr. Hauser was holding him while Mrs. Hauser gleamed. Charlotte finally forgave my parents, but Mom said she didn't want to hear anything about me. I was devastated. I cut off Serena and moved back to Chicago with my parents. Serena showed up there a week later, saying she was back with her parents, too, and wanted to take the baby, but my mom said no. She was going to figure out what to do with the baby because it wasn't fair that she was thinking of keeping her from her grandparents and brother. Dad gave her a cease and desist, prepped by his lawyer, and all Serena could do was shrug and walk away. Still thinking I was Jolie's mother, Charlotte's attorneys contacted me with an offer from my sister. Daddy said the time had come for her to hear the truth, and I agreed. On a hot day in July, I left the baby with the Hausers, and my parents and I went to the meeting. They waited in another room, and I went into another where my angry sister waited. I sat across from her, had some water, and told the three of them everything that happened during that trip, and it took Charlotte only seconds to forgive me. She got Serena to sign over her rights and disappear from our lives, but Serena thought I was going to go back to being her friend. I shut that down fast. I was glad Charlotte got rid of her, with paperwork to back her up if Serena returned, but mostly, my happiness was because I had my sister back. A year later, Charlotte bought me a home next to hers after I became engaged to one of Daddy's interns. Lawrence Fuller and I were beyond surprised with her gift and beyond grateful, especially after she paid to renovate it the way we wanted as a wedding present. She even hired a crew and promised to watch over them while we were on our honeymoon. She didn't tell anyone what she'd done, as she didn't need any accolades, and I loved her even more for it. And I was honored when she asked me to witness her wedding 3 years later to her attorney, John Grayson Jr. Charlotte got pregnant almost as fast as I did after the wedding. Ren and I had a son 10 months after our marriage, and I learned we were having a second one right after Oliver Lawrence turned 2. I was happy, and more so every time our children, along with Angie's, who moved into the house on the other side of Charlotte. My sister and I teased Angie relentlessly that she was going to get pregnant again soon, but she'd always said she had 4, so she was done. And her turning 40 when I became pregnant the second time cinched it. We heard her and her husband often. They had to have the best birth control. Life settled into a new kind of normal, filled with laughter, the occasional chaos of children running between houses, and impromptu dinners shared across our massive, shared backyard. Sometimes, I would glance over at Charlotte's place and feel a sense of gratitude, knowing that after everything, we had managed to find a way back to each other. The bonds between our families grew stronger, and I felt like the future was something to look forward to, not just survive.